it. All right. All right. So everybody be on their good behavior.
Well, like I said, it also helps with the notes if you need to sit there and expound on whatever it is for the minutes.
There you go. Well, super.
Yeah.
Well,
Don't
thanks.
say fire or fog.
Well, Blade, it's, on the heels of Goolsby landing in the water too. So that, whoever can talk about that, he safely recovered from that. And that's probably why he's not on this call today, because I think he was out trying to recover his plane. So.
And it's his birthday, so hopefully he's out celebrating with his bride.
Oh, wow. So.
I think he's still trying to get water out of his ears.
Someone said one more and he's an ace. Is that right? He's crashed 4?
I know 3.
3 that I know of.
Okay,
2 in the water.
yeah.
Last 2.
Yeah, I guess that, if he was a Navy guy, then he doesn't have to go through the Dilbert Dunker anymore.
He might even qualify for Aquaman. You never know.
God bless him.
Cool. Well, let's get this thing on the roll. I just wanted to give you guys some updates about some stuff that's going on, talk about some trends that we've been seeing, get some stand issues, talk about some technique stuff, see what you guys got, and go from there. One thing that's on the near horizon, we hope, is to have a national fast manual. I want to let you guys know that that's on the horizon. Mike Felucci and I have been working on it. Gil has been making a bunch of inputs to it. And the really cool thing about this is that we've got the 3 big signatories, NATA, RPA, and the T-34 guys, all of them trying to get together and having a common manual, which will be great for standardization. We're doing so much flying between the organizations now. When we go to a clinic, we get a mishmash of all sorts of different kinds of airplanes. So we're hoping that this helps with the standardization between the organizations. Smitty's on board. Larry Lumpkin, who's president of NATA, has been pushing for this. And of course, Gil was one of the big proponents of it. So I think it'll be a great deal. We took the manual that was originally has morphed from the RPA manual to the FAST manual that's online right now. We're taking and doing a bunch of updates, trying to make it so that there's a number of different airplanes on it in the pictures and examples and things like that. Hope to have it accepted by Oshkosh is the goal. So that's something to look forward to.
I think that you also mentioned that there's going to be appendix that show bearing lines, other relevant data for each one of the airplanes that are in the beginning when we only had yaks and nanchangs and it was no more than 10 knots difference. We really didn't worry about maneuvering airspeed, minimum airspeed, maximum airspeed. But now when we start blending with everyone else, and I know whenever I was flying with NATA Trayron T6s, all they did was talk about manifold pressure. They never really talked about what maneuvering speed we're going to target here. I think that's important for dissimilar. I think it's relevant for knowing what your closure rate is. And it's also something that's a decision maker in the briefing where do you really want this airplane as a part of your flight because of its airspeed capabilities or limitations?
That's a great point, Kilo. And to just expound upon that, the idea of this manual is that it will be the overall standard. The goal is to try and make it general enough, but yet specific enough to work for everybody. The idea is that we will have an appendix. Each signatory, the 17 signatories, each of them will be able to add their own appendix to the manual. There will be an appendix for comm. There will be an appendix for visual signals, for bearing lines, and dissimilar aircraft. So yes, we hope that, yeah, like I said, it'll be a basic manual, hopefully specific enough to cover everything, but yet not so specific that it doesn't eliminate the jet guys, doesn't eliminate some of the smaller, lighter airplanes too.
Yeah, not to say that we're going to put a specific airspeed in there, but that it becomes a part of a standard brief, especially whenever you have dissimilar aircraft, to emphasize, hey, have you thought about, Now, if I don't want to get any slower than 130 or 140 knots in my airplane, what am I doing flying with yaks at 110 or 115? And that's just one example of many that we could come up with.
Absolutely, and it'll include that.
Yeah.
So can you give us an idea of just top level, what some of the changes relative to the RPA and what some of the, hot topics are so that we're prepared to administer?
Yeah,
the
I'll hit some of those as we're going through here. I would say that, Gil, wouldn't you agree with me that it's 85% the RPA manual?
At least. Yeah. I think that we've been leading standardization among the signatories, and basically, it's being done by Line Dog and Blade. So they're taking our manual, adding a bunch of pictures of T6s and some other and T-34s to it and some jet pictures, and bring that standardization.
Something that Kilo brought up, which is it's been very interesting. NATA, I don't know how much you guys have interfaced with NATA, but they do things differently. For instance, we talked about rejoin airspeeds, and they go, rejoin airspeeds? What do you mean rejoin airspeeds? We don't talk about airspeed during a rejoin. It's like, well, you know what? Maybe you guys should think about rejoin airspeeds and briefing that so that people know what speed you're flying during a rejoin. Things like that. That I think we're gonna get other people kind of in line with what we've been doing for a long time. But yeah, I'll cover a few things as we're going through, and I don't see any big changes that I think that any of us are really going to have any issues with. I would certainly welcome your feedback. The idea right now is we've gone through, 3 iterations, Gil, now? 4 iterations back and forth, out to the big 3 signatory leaders to look over, to get comments and feedback. One thing that is a big difference, which I'm a really strong proponent of, is it was separated into 2 ship sections and 4 ship section before in the manual. And so I found myself going to the 2 ship section and going, no, it's not here, it's in the 4 ship section, and back and forth. So we're trying to get that together so that it's all in one place. It's not a separate chapter for 4 ship. But that's really about the biggest change, I think. But we'll hit a few other things as we're going through here.
Looks like the birthday boy is coming alive.
There he is.
Happy birthday.
Birthday!
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy
Oh, look, he
birthday,
can't,
dear
but he can't talk back to us.
Happy
right now.
birthday, Pappy.
We've got you on mute.
Perfect. Yeah.
Happy, let us see your gills.
Oh, there's one, Gil. Yeah.
We're gonna make you an honorary frogman here.
Hey, Pappy, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Unmute yourself, Pappy. There you go.
Ah, do you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, there he is.
Yeah, we just
Hey,
pulled the airplane out of the lake, and the very professional recovery team that Georgia Pacific said that they would only hire, they wouldn't hire me or let me do it, and they ended up damaging the airplane even more than it was. So
Oh, man.
that's not good.
That's,
no. And it's been in the water 10 days, and it's, I already see a lot of corrosion, so rust. So it's a total loss. So, anyway,
Well, at least you
back
didn't
to
break
the
the ice
regular
to it.
stuff.
But at least you're still with us. That's the important thing.
absolutely, Pappy. We're glad that it
I've been
worked out.
interviewed 4 times. I've been interviewed 4 times by the different TV people around here, and they each asked me, one, was I scared? And I said, no, but I knew what was going to happen, and I was really pissed. And but they didn't put that on TV.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many times the guys in the ambulance asked me who the president of the United States, and it really bugged me. Anyway.
Do you log that as a landing, Pappy?
Yes. The FAA guy came out with me to look at the site, And he says, you know, the only reason I'm out here is because they had it all on TV and the telephone rings when they do that. So he had to say that, come out and look and see at it, and said, yes, we investigated it, and they're going to call it an incident.
Well, have they,
And,
because
but
of the damage to the airplane, were you able to confirm that it was a throttle linkage issue?
Yeah, yeah. And I hate to say this, but there was for one of a nail, a shoe was lost. For one of a shoe, a horse was lost. For one of a horse, a battle was lost. Well, a cotter pin was missing. So, and I nut backed off on the throttle arm, and it disengaged from its little teeth, and that was it. So, anyway, that's my bad.
Let's see. Dan Booker is
Anyway.
trying to log on here, I guess. He just tried
Where
to
was I?
call. Stand by just a second to see if I can get him on board. All right. Anyways, okay, we'll try him back when he gets back. Okay, so we were going through, like I said, the manual. The idea is we're going to try and get it out. Oh, there we go. All right, good deals.
Yes.
We'll try and get the manual out as soon as we can. We're hoping to have it by Oshkosh, get it accepted. The postal's on board with it. The vice presidents are on board with it. I think it'll work out really well. Dun, dun, dun. That's the biggest stuff on the updates. Trends. Anything you guys are seeing as a trend that I need to know about? And I've got a few things that I want to talk about, but I'm curious to hear what you guys are seeing as trends out there. Anybody?
Well, I've been noticing that we're starting to get guys that have not really been prepared for the check ride, either because of skill level or knowledge base.
Anybody else on that? Because I definitely saw that. I've seen that several times in the last couple of years. One of the first things we tried to do last year with the lead meeting was to try and get everybody on board. And I think we still have a lot of work to do as far as getting guys prepared for check rides.
You know, it hasn't happened that often with me, but obviously we all just make it an incomplete, call it a training flight, go back and then grab the lead that gave the rec or the recommendation and start talking to them. Because they are ultimately responsible, even though the person may have stage fright or just doesn't like taking a test. And as long as we push that emphasis back on the lead that recommended, or maybe one step further in the training process, I think that's important.
Absolutely.
The worst thing you ever want to hear is your student tell a check airman, "Oh, Hess didn't teach me that."
Yeah.
How damn well you did.
Yeah.
Which
That's the first time I've heard that.
yeah. Well, and of course we all have been there enough to know that students sometimes forget and throw their instructors under the bus. But I will say that I've seen a fair amount of this lately. And one thing I did want to cover with you guys is the recommendation. And I'm trying, this is my push, but I'm trying to get away from the term rec ride to try and get it to more of a recommendation. The reason for that, I mean, if you guys are all, everybody's a CFI, we've been instructors. And I got to thinking about this. How would we feel if a guy came up to you, if you're a CFI out at the airport, and this guy came up and said, "Hey, I got 100 hours of flying time, and I've got my FAA check ride for my private pilot's license scheduled next week, and I want you to recommend me for the check ride." I mean, it's not going to happen, right? Because you want to have some sort of a basis of knowledge about this individual, what kind of training they've had before you're going to make any kind of a recommendation. And I really think that we're kind of setting guys up for failure by this concept of a rec ride per se. I'm not against a rec ride in that I think it's great to do a mock check ride before the ride, but I would like to see us thinking, and I'm going to push this in the lead meeting tomorrow, of it being a recommendation. And because of that, I don't necessarily want to see it on one ride. Hopefully we're basing this on having a history with this guy, maybe flown 3 or 4 times with him, something like that, at least having some sort of background knowledge about his training before recommending it.
Well, in the military, we had, and we all know this, FAM and FORM syllabus. So you went through a familiarization syllabus. It could be FAM 1 through 10. It could be Form 1 through 10. And Formation 10 is a ride to show your proficiency. And in that, you have syllabus that have to be met within each one of the FORM or FAM flights. And FAM could be 2-ship, FORM could be 4-ship. And you just have 1 through however many, and they have to meet the minimum criteria before they go to the next FAM or FORM level.
Well, I think that's great. Unfortunately, I think that we see that the training that these guys get is not as formal as it was in the military. That, you know,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
There's we don't have the training documentation, although, and I will say, I mean, we got new training forms. We got an explanation on how to do that. It's on the website. We got a new recommendation form and a guide on how to conduct a recommendation. And this is something I'm going to hammer home with the leads tomorrow, is that there's more to a rec ride than making sure that the guy is not going to kill you. You know, that it has to involve making sure that all the different training evolutions of maneuvers have been trained. And frankly, I don't care on a recommendation whether the last ride contained every single maneuver. If you couldn't do something because of weather, but you've seen him do it before to satisfactory, then great. There's another loosening of the criteria, so to speak, is that there's nowhere in the FF&P that says that everybody has to have a fast card on a recommendation ride. And because we're going to this concept of training a guy, hopefully more than one flight, hopefully more than one look, that training may happen without a fast carded guy in the flight, and leave that up to the lead. And if it's satisfactory to the lead and he thinks they're going to do a good job, then for the recommendation, it's not necessary. For the check ride, that is an FF&P thing, and we can't change that. But so those are a couple of to the recommendations itself. There's a recommendation guide that explains all this stuff online, and I'm going to really encourage the leads to take a pick at that and make sure that we're covering all our bases.
Jeff, could you just emphasize to the leads that it's okay if a guy doesn't pass a rec ride? We're pretty mature here in the Northeast. We don't have many rec rides or check rides, but historically, if a guy came up for a rec ride, he just passed it. It just happened. And I think we need to be where the leads have the, I guess, the balls to just say, you know what, you didn't quite hack it today.
Yeah, Jeff, can you kind of help me understand why it is you don't want a single point recommendation ride that gets really in effect prepares a student for a successful check ride, or identifies where they need work?
I'm not at all against a quote unquote rec ride. I'm not against, what I'm trying to do is trying to give a lead more than just a single 45-minute flight look back at this guy's experience. Because just seeing a guy for 45 minutes, I'm not sure is a really good judge of how he's doing as a formation pilot.
Maybe he just got lucky.
So like I said, I'm not going to say we can't do it. That's not my point. You know, if Ranger, if you came up to me and said, hey, this guy walks on water, he's an ex-military guy, I've spent 5 rides with him, and he's good as gold, but I can't fly with him today, would you give him a recommendation? Then I'd probably go, okay, yeah, that's fine. Based on your recommendation, based on your, opinion and all that. And I might even say to you, well, has he done everything up to now perfectly? Then why can't you just recommend him right now? It doesn't have to necessarily be a flight that you're basing the recommendation on. But again, there's a lot more than just a flight to a recommendation. There's making sure they know the visual signals. There's making sure they know what's necessary, what the practical test guide says, making sure that they know the air show op stuff, making sure that all the different things that are part of the recommendation, part of the check ride, that these guys shouldn't go to a check ride and be surprised. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize to the leads.
Jeff, you make a good point about not being surprised. And maybe in my years, what I like to do is when I do a recommendation, you fly the check ride profile or as close as what you expect it to be. Because if, let's say, over 5 rides, he got everything done up to speed, but can he do it all in one? And so that puts a little bit of a pressure on him. And I like to see that they can do that before I recommend, just my own personal thing.
No, I think that's fine. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I would like to see us having more than just one flight. And that's my,
Well, that would be a trend for the leads, to talk to the leads. If you're doing if you're conscientious as a lead, just as a CFI, you're going to see that person more than one flight. And you're going to know that you built them up to this point because your name's on the line, your reputation's on the line.
And that's the point that I'm going to try and hammer home tomorrow, is that when you recommend a guy for a check ride, that you own him. And I'm going to be nice about it, but I'm going to say, as a check pilot, if the guy sucks and he wasn't prepared, I'm going to come back to you and say, hey, what's the deal? Why didn't he know this? Why didn't he know that? And hammer that home, because I do think we've got a lot of work to do that way.
The check ride is a reflection on the instruction. That's right.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
But if I can interject for a second, Jeff, I think one of the things that we want to make sure you as our check airman understand, and maybe it was Soprano who said something about having the balls. Yeah, they have to have the balls. You guys have to have the balls too, to be able to vet your checkee right away and make sure that, and I'll give you and make sure that they're ready for the check ride. Because I'll give you an example. We had a recommendation for a check ride out here on the west of the Mississippi from a clinic, and the guy didn't go through any of the book, didn't go through the oral, didn't go through air show ops, and that wasn't discovered until the check ride. And I think that, you as the check airman have to take control of that, because we have a lot of leads. We have like 200 leads, and they're going to send you candidates, and we got to put an end to a improper recommendation.
I totally agree.
Absolutely. Well, sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement with that. Anybody got anything before we move on?
Real quick question. Is there any time limit from the time a person gets a recommendation ride to the time they can get a check ride? I don't know.
Yeah, we actually, that was a change that we put in. The FAA has a 60-day limit from the time a person is recommended to the time they can take a check ride. And we took that as a good sign and said that that's the limit that we want to see.
Okay, where is that referenced?
In the recommendation guide.
Okay, the recommendation guide. All right, thank you.
You betcha.
One of the things I've always had a thing about is there's nothing on the recommendation or the check ride form that lists the guy's license number and his medical date. And I think that a check pilot, and I always do, I ask to see their license, I ask to see their medical. But there's nothing on the form showing that it was looked at.
Yeah, Jim,
And
and
I pulled
also,
this up.
we're trying to, at the clinics in the South Central here, we try to put emphasis that those things are validated when they walk in the door and they put their money down on the table too, so that the lead and the authorities at the clinic are not having to validate that every time. But that's kind of one of the checks in the box on our new idea with computerizing the clinic a little bit and for scheduling. So, but I agree though, the last clinic I attended that we did a pretty good job of making sure that when somebody was in a wreck or a check that those credentials were presented before the ride.
And yeah, and I don't have to say it to you guys, but we all know that we're doing this for the FAA. I mean, we have a handshake with the FAA that we are adhering to these standards, and they're relying on us to do that. So yeah, that would set a tone, I think, also for the check ride if we're checking certificates and medicals.
Well, how far does that go with, let's go one step in the other direction, line check, that they do have an airplane that did have a conditional within the last 12 months and that the chute is current. I mean, are we going to go that far?
Let me
To have
interject
them
here for a
approve?
second from the top. I don't think we want to go down this route because it adds a layer of liability once you start checking this that I don't think we need to have.
All right.
I'm with Gil on that. You want to, you want to do a certain amount of due diligence, but you don't want to get yourself to where you're acting as a full-on designated examiner.
All right.
I just want to ask for clarification, but it is okay to see his certificate and his medical. That's okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you can ask for whatever you want. That would be the qualification, the how many formation flights they've done, and do they qualify for the what they're aiming for. It just if we start putting everything and documenting everything, it's kind of like the conversation we had 5 years ago about wanting to keep the training records. That you go back and forth on that one on whether you're creating documentation to be sued for something. So it's I think it's one of those that it's not anything National Fast is going to tell you to do. And I think Gil's kind of on the same sheet of music, but I'll let him talk for himself if he disagrees.
No, I totally agree. I think if the clinic organizer wants to ask to see, or a check pilot wants to ask to see anything you want, you're welcome to. We're not going to make it RPA policy just for the liability purpose.
What Popper was alluding to is this new software that they're trying to introduce to these clinics will be more inclusive. And Pappy, for your concern, that would also include, show me your pilot's license, show me your medical, tell me what your expectations are, what's your FAST qualification, so that we can be more learned in how we place you in the schedule for the next 3 or 4 days. Is that right, Popper?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, clearly, the purpose of the software is not to determine qualifications as, did you show up with a chute that was legal? But the purpose of the software is to help scheduling purposes so that when somebody shows up to fly, that we get them in flights. I mean, as a lot of you did too, we showed up at clinics back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And when I showed up at a clinic, if you weren't well known, you didn't get to fly. You kind of was hoping somebody would say, okay, you go with this guy. And so the whole idea was to get as many people that showed up in flights that were good flights that they could learn from, that they had a good qualified lead and that they had good backseaters and everything. And so as some of you have witnessed, Gil was out in Lamar, and he started to see that where we start putting these flights together. And by golly, in the morning when we showed up and briefed, every plane was in the air, and that wasn't always the case when I'd seen. So that was the purpose of our software, is to try to get scheduling done so that, but then we start adding on, okay, we got the, emergency point of contact. We've got all the information that we need to know about every pilot there, what kind of plane they're in. All that information is just readily available right there for the clinic administrators. So, but
Right.
yeah, you're correct. That wasn't the basis for it, but yeah, that made it easy to add that they had showed their credentials, and it showed that they had the most recent flights and formation. They've been to schools and that type of thing.
Well, for all of us here, how do we validate that they have the minimum number of flight hours necessary for a basic wing card, and that they have the basic number of flight hours in formation? I mean, truly, without some type of training record and without their flight log, how do we know that they meet the minimum criteria that we've set for the number of hours before we take them out on the check ride?
We just always ask.
You take their word for it, right?
Take their word for it, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if they qualify and they have the qualifications and they're flying a good airplane, then you're gonna have to take their word for it. You might have flown with them a couple of times. You probably have an idea of how close they are to how many hours they have, but you're not gonna keep their logbook for them.
No, and that's what I'm getting at. We try and trust the people that are in this clinic. I mean, they aren't coming to us with with the wrong idea. You've got to trust the people that are on your wing. As they perform in the flight, you gain that sense of comfort that they know what they're doing, that they've been around the block, that regardless of if you see their logbook or not, that they're qualified and capable of being a good number 2 or number 4. But there's some point in time where you take their word for it, and you don't have to always have them prove something in black and white, right?
So I would submit that you all got your call by sending an email, made the minimums to be a check pilot, and National Fast is okay with the same type of endorsement. I just require that someone sends me an email that says that they have some level of qualification and background.
Okay.
Okay, so what are any other trends? I've got a couple that I wanted to talk about, but seeing if anybody else has got something that's burning their hide right now.
How's the paperwork thing going? With OP and has there been any issues with other than mine? I mean,
what a great segue. What a great segue. That is one of the things that I want to talk about. I'll hold off on that for just a second, in that I want to ask you guys a question. Have you seen people showing up to clinics with very little time in the airplane and expecting formation training?
Yes.
Is this a problem that keeps reoccurring? Okay, I definitely see it. I saw it on this last clinic I went to, a guy that, a very experienced F-16 guy. Formation, you betcha, new to the airplane, and his rudders kind of scared me, frankly. And I don't know how much you guys know, but NATO actually has a check ride a single ship check ride that they administer before they allow formation training to occur. And the single ship check ride entails doing a 60-degree bank level turn like a brake, doing some stalls, seeing if a guy can land on one half of the runway at a designated spot on the runway as a minimum before they start formation training. And I'd like to hear what you guys' thoughts are on that, going forward, if that's something that we want to have as part of our program.
I think, Jeff, having flown the airplane, that's a T6ism, because landing on your half of the runway and staying on your half of the runway on that airplane is not as easy as it is on the airplanes we fly. The planes we fly, it's a hell of a lot easier, and it's really not a factor.
Okay.
I've got some input on this. I've seen some really inexperienced people show up at these clinics and they don't really even know how inexperienced they are. And they just see guys flying around in formation and they want to jump in and do it. One of the things I think is we should, when you start a clinic, whether it's the software or in our smaller clinics that I run up here, we sat down at the very beginning and kind of look at who we've got. And if we've got a new guy, that's where the clinic organizer or the check pilot jumps in and starts talking to them. Hey, what's your experience? What are you getting? And we always throw the new guys in the back seat first so that they can get one ride in. And then usually the who he's flying with lets him fly a little bit and gets an idea of where he's actually coming from. And then one of the things I don't like about being a check pilot is I spend all my time in the back seats. Usually what I do then is I go up with the new guys, and that's how they're going to learn anyway. So, making them take another check ride and stuff like that, it's one way of doing it. But I think our best bet is, you get a feel for him, let him go in the back seat as a new guy, and then throw an experienced lead or a check pilot or one of our old instructor pilot guys in and let them go. I mean, that's what we have to do. But
this could
forcing
be
them.
Pandora's box too. It's okay if we're talking about Nanchangs and yaks, but when you get dissimilar and we've got somebody that just shows up, they've got a T6 or they've got something, a PITS, whatever the heck, and they only have 10 hours in it. We don't have that type of instruction that we can provide for them in most cases. We do have people that have 200 hours plus in the T6. That's an exception to the rule. But T28, T34, whatever it is that shows up on your doorstep, you're not that guy that may be able to get them through what they need to know for the basic skill set just to fly the airplane. You will get to know that person just by talking to them and finding out what their background is and how much experience they've got. And the clue bird better show up pretty quick whenever they say, well, I just bought it last week. So
I think,
and how many
Kilo,
hours did you have before that?
I think, Kilo, what Line Dog's talking about is, do you and me and all the rest of us use our personal judgment to decide what's the best thing to do? Or do we have some institutional rules for it? And I think that's what Line Dog's talking about. We don't need rules about it.
And I would use my own intuition personally on this and hope that we, and the experience that we have with hopefully experienced leads and not just a check pilot, but that we put common sense into it and try and understand who this person is before we invite them into a flight. And true, we put them in the back seat. And then we also do a show and tell in most cases. Whenever it's their turn, I'm going to demonstrate, hopefully do it right, so that then you can do it after I showed you how to do it. So there is a progressive level that we use for these new guys. And we also have something in our briefing guide that says that it's the lead's responsibility to choose who is in their flight and their qualifications.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is no need to institutionalize it, but it's something that we should be concerned about because several of us have seen that as a problem.
Be
Is
aware.
that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's a fair assumption. If I might very quickly, Jeff, what we've been doing at ARS for the last few years is prior to everybody's arrival, I am phoning everybody that I don't know and getting an idea of their background, their aircraft, how many hours they have, what their training expectations are, if they've started training, if they haven't started training. And then through a conversation before they even get there, we decide, okay, well, if you wouldn't mind, if you just bought your Yak 52, oh, that's really cool. Come on out and we'll jump in the back seat of some other Yak 52s and see how that goes. So if you set the expectations well ahead of time, they show up and they're happy to jump in the back seat and just learn. And some of them are ready to learn, some of them aren't. You just have to, I think, use judgment on the day.
That's great. And then one of the things that then I'm going to push tomorrow when we talk to the leads is just that we want to make sure that these guys are prepared ahead of time. It's great to be able to reach out ahead of time, but at least think about a transition, put them in the back seat for a couple of rides. One other question, are we rushing guys into 4-ship too soon?
I don't think so,
don't
because
think
it would be a wasted flight if they weren't ready for it. I mean, it takes a lot to get the lead, the alternate lead, and the number of instructors necessary to make that flight happen. And I would not waste that if I were pushing it too soon.
Does everybody pretty much agree with that?
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because in two of the other signatories that they're seeing that as a problem. And so I want to make sure that that was something that we weren't seeing, that we were doing a good job of policing that.
Yeah,
Cool.
Jeff, on that comment, I would put a little emphasis on that tomorrow night on the lead, because those are the guys recommending them to go to 4. And just make sure they understand the emphasis that we're talking about there, that are they really ready to go to 4, or do we just we can't logically put up more 2 ships? Because we don't, that scheduling, that's one of the biggest problems we have at clinics right now, is enough people to lead them around. And so, and that probably is the reason they're getting to 4 ships early, is because we don't have enough leads showing up to lead them around. So
Yeah.
I would say it's not a problem, but just put emphasis on it in the lead meeting. I would do that.
So
Well,
something that I would love to see is, I'm sorry, Pappy, go ahead.
I didn't say anything.
Okay.
I didn't
I
say
saw
anything.
your, okay, cool.
Oh, I don't know. I was just scratching my nose. Picking it, actually.
Good deals. All right, on to some standardization stuff then. Yeah, like Ranger said, Gil and I were talking about this the other day, and the documentation stuff, I mean, not to be a pain in the ass, but boy, I tell you what, there's probably only 25% of the recommendation and check ride forms that we get that don't need some sort of corrective action. So it would be great if we took a little bit of time to look over the recommendation before you do the check ride, make sure it was accomplished correctly, make sure the guy's ready. And then when we're doing the check ride, I know it's the end of the day and you're trying to get everything done and get on to having a beer and congratulations and everything, but please take your time. Just make sure that the whole thing is filled out. We spent a fair amount of time changing the recommendation and check ride forms to try and make it a little easier and make it clear as to what's required and what's not required. And that was something that Gomez for sure was on board with trying to get, so that we knew exactly what was and was not expected on a check ride. So please just look at that. Something that was thrown around with the Standardization Advisory Committee was wing approaches and whether we were going to require a wing approach. And the decision was made that wing approaches were going to be checked on check rides, though it's not necessarily, a landing is not required. And it's even to the point where we just want to make sure a guy can get configured and get into the landing configuration and go around without having problems for use in an emergency. So that is an element that's required on the check ride. In addition to an overhead, does that make it a little bit cumbersome? Yes. But the approach can actually be done in the training area. If that is something that makes it too onerous to do 2 things at an airport, just the idea of trying to get the guy, making sure that he knows how to get configured and a simulated go around is all that we're really looking for there.
So can I interject here, Jeff? And you and I have discussed this ad nauseum, and I don't want to derail it, but are the check pilots that are here, are you guys, when you're doing a check ride, are you doing an overhead approach and also doing a 2-ship element approach on the check ride? And I'm not asking to catch you on this. It's just that in 12 years or whatever that I've been with the RPA, I've only ever seen that done once, and we're mandating it. And so the question is it reasonable? Is it a reasonable mandate? Do we want that? Do we not want that? And I feel like maybe we shouldn't be asking the question, but I really want to know.
So until this weekend, which I wasn't aware of this until this weekend. No, I've never done it for this signatory or any of them. This weekend I did it on all 3 check rides.
Yeah, I have not done it until just very recently, partially because I'll choose one. And my experience is in the 25 years I've been doing this is that pretty much anybody who's gone through a recommendation ride has probably done a pitch out to join, a break into land. But what they probably haven't done is a formation landing. So I have my habit pattern, this is my technique, nobody's but technique, but the Rangers, is to have the formation break up and then have the candidate come in, be brought in for, at least a formation approach. And if it doesn't work out, then you can go around and come back into the break. That's how I'm handling it. Is what I'm doing is I'm breaking up the flight, having lead and or fly a formation approach and then depart, come back around for the break, but not in 4-ship, in 2-ship.
For Ranger, my technique is to break up out in the area into 2 elements and then do the same thing. We do a configuration change, do a simulated descent, and then a go around. And then when we're done with that, we come back in as 2 separate elements. But if I saw that because I happen to be in the other airplane earlier in a flight, I've already seen that. I don't have to see it in the guy's back seat. So I'm the kind of guy that's going to give him credit because I saw it from the other airplane when we conducted this 2 sorties earlier.
Yeah, and that's always been the nice kind of discretion that we've had. And
Right.
sometimes that, and I agree with you, the best way to do it, if you have to do both, break the flight up, make sure you have enough gas, break the flight up, do the 2-ship stuff. And
So just to be clear, the check ride form says that a box needs to be checked for both approaches on the check ride.
Correct, but it doesn't say if it has to be a 4-ship break
Nope.
to a landing.
Nope.
Okay.
I just want to know that you guys are all on board and comfortable checking both boxes, because invariably when those check ride forms come in, only one is checked. And then we have to go back to you check pilots and say, both are required. Why didn't you do it? And then we found out you did do it. It's just something that we want to clean up. Would you agree, Jeff?
Absolutely. And I'm all for discretion, but I would at least hope that you would see, whether it's in another flight or verify that the guy can do a formation approach. And going back to the 2-ship thing for just a second, something that, as far as the scheduling thing goes, I think it does a lot of good for new guys to see some lead in addition to wing. So if you've got 2 new guys with 2 guys in their back seat, I have no problems with having a guy spend half of his flight watching the backseater lead and perhaps do some of the flying.
That's what
We do that by necessity in most cases. We get out to a clinic and we've got 2 instructors in the back seat of 2 new guys, and we're trying to do show and tell with that, and they will see it. I mean, just out of a lack of number of instructors and check pilots at the clinic.
Yeah, we've been doing that at Red Star. Let's remember, Byron remembers when we all started out in the Navy. You let out, and there was a lead change, and the first saw formation in a T2 or T4, and you did both. And how you learn how to be lead if you don't?
Absolutely, and we've even gone so far as put in the training forms that, and I think it's very important that even a wing guy should be able to lead back to the airport in case of an emergency. If their element lead had a problem, he may very well have to lead his element lead back to the airport. So I think in our training, we'd love to have that at least emphasized a little bit. A question for you guys. I tried to get us talking about emergencies more during training episodes, and I asked for all leads to try and train an emergency before or after the flight. Are we doing that? I mean, I know you guys are doing it, but are we seeing it at clinics where actually guys are taking the time to brief, you know, the emergency of the day?
I think what's happening is that there's enough challenges during the flights that we see knock-it-offs and terminates that you don't need to artificially do it. Seriously, they happen on their own.
Yeah.
Line Dog, you may have noticed in our, with the Epsilon group, our new kind of Epsilon standards that we come up with, that is one of our standards. There will be an emergency of the day briefed in the briefing.
That and the systems question of the day should be a part of every brief. That whatever it is that you want to talk about, I don't care if it's cylinder head temperature, oil pressure, but there should be an emergency and a systems question as part of every brief so that people think. They may not know the answer, but they'll walk away with the correct answer.
And hand signals.
Yeah, please.
Cool. Well, I hope that that's happening. It's something else that I want to try and emphasize with the leads tomorrow to make sure that we're getting that going. So I appreciate your support on that. One other issue that's come up in the past, I want to ask about the similar aircraft. Guy shows up with a Pitts or a Mooney at a clinic and kind of what the party line is going to be, where the check pilots were kind of overseeing the clinics. I want to make sure we're kind of on the same page with that. And I think it probably goes along with some of the stuff that Frito said, that we can reach out ahead of time and make sure that it's not going to be an issue, then they don't get disappointed when they show up. If we can manage their expectations and say, hey, it's great that you got this serious and we'd love to have you participate. We'd like you to get in the back seat, kind of watch and see what we do, see if that's something you really want to do, with the hopes that maybe they'll realize that they bought the wrong airplane. They really need an airplane like what is more suitable for our training, and go from there. Now, I know that I see Gomez moving around in his seat, and I know he differs in opinion, and I know that we can train guys in formation, in Moonies, in Piper Clippers and Piper Cubs, whatever, but is it really the kind of training that we expect a guy to be able to do to get a fast card? So that's kind of the differentiation. Yes, we can teach them to fly formation. Do we really want to take it to the point where their expectation is that they're going to get a fast card in a series?
There was
Years
a
ago,
limitation. I think it was the T-34 that said, this is what we do and this is what we don't do. They said it within the last 2 weeks. I liked exactly what came out of their mouth. And what I don't like is being surprised at a clinic after I try and talk to the organizer and say, if they show up in this airplane, they better have somebody that's going to teach them, because I'm not going to be requiring my leads to teach them in that airplane, and they show up anyway. That's what bothers me a lot. And if you've never thought about getting in a Stearman and teaching somebody how to fly formation, what seat are you going to be sitting in? And how are you going to know that that person's doing exactly what you're telling them to do? I mean, that's just the thought process before you ever even go out and fly the darn thing. And whenever the coordinator or whenever the organizer of that clinic doesn't pay attention to what you're trying to guide them through and makes it a free-for-all, it really bothers me to show up.
So going to what Kilo said about the T-34s, Smitty, I've talked to Smitty about this, the head of the T-34 guys. They consider it a huge liability to try and take on somebody that doesn't have, and that's why they came out with the policy that specifically says tandem, bubble canopy, stick airplanes. And they're very emphatic about it, and because they see it as a liability.
Well, there was an accident years ago with those, the Japanese version of the T-34, I forget what you call it. And there was, I remember there was at the time a big discussion about no cabin airplanes. And, that it was had to be all tandem canopies.
Well, that's what it says in the original our original documents when we first started this whole thing 20 some odd years ago. It was it was something I think out of the T-34 manual was random stick bubble low wing, bubble canopy low wing aircraft. There is one of the things that Harley has been working on for a long time is creating a place for these aircraft to go and fly and get training, and training protocols that are specific for them. And Keela had a great point. I wouldn't try to teach someone to fly Stearman formation unless I was in a Stearman formation clinic. But you know, there's the FFI for the cabin, there's the Stearman Association for the Stearmans, then there's the JFLC for the high wing, you know, liaison aircraft, and they have their own training rules, their own training protocols. They have their the people that have trained and know how to train those folks. You know, we silo them at Red Star, and of course they're welcome, and of course they're welcome to sit in but I don't fly, I don't train and check in cabin class aircraft.
Exactly, and I know Gil's thoughts on this. I mean, anybody that shows up as a potential new member, you know, we can get them in our ranks, which is a great thing. I do think that, you know, if we can manage expectations ahead of time, that might be our best way, instead of coming down with a hard, fast policy, you know, and institutionalize it. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. And I just wanted to see what you guys thought on that, because Smitty did come down and they're hard line on that now.
So just as ARS is around the corner, and I've got you and Gil sitting there, what so is our position, because I'm going to be dealing with these guys, is our position to manage expectations and kind of take it on a case-by-case basis, or how do you want me to handle that?
So our guidelines for clinic organizers has been no high wing aircraft. So no biplanes, no Cessnas, none of those. But if it's anything else, it's officially at the discretion of the clinic organizers. So if you can make it work and you can send 2 Moonies out to fly, or a Thorpe or something, and you're comfortable with that, great. You're responsible for making those, you know, those big boy decisions. And one of the things that I think I really am asking of you as check pilots is get involved in the organization of clinics. When you find out that somebody in your region is starting a clinic, you know, they're going to have a new clinic, and you're in that region, call them. Say, how can I help? Let me help you. Let me help you with running the, you know, the schedule, the board. Let me do what Frito does, you know, so well for all Red Star, which is calling each of these guys before and finding out what their experience is. But if you just go and show up at a clinic, then you've handed over that reign and responsibility to somebody who doesn't have your experience. And then you're batting cleanup, right?
I've been involved in the organization and expectations of a clinic only to be ignored, show up at the clinic and have a pit special, a Stearman, a T-28, and several other. And the T-28 wants to get a card. He wants to get a check ride. And the only thing that we've got as a platform is one CJ that might get to 130 knots. And they knew that in the organization process, and it still showed up. So what do you do there? Because I show up and say, I'm not going to be the guy in that back seat. So you handle it because you're the one that put it together.
So there's precedent here for, if you look at, as much as we all love the FAA, you look at the way FAA handles check rides. Hey, thanks for that. As I assume most of you know, if you can take a private pilot commercial instrument check ride in an experimental airplane at the examiner's discretion. And several of us on the call here have experience with that. I got both my instrument, my commercial, my 52. Gil got his commercial and the CJ. I don't know about the rest of you guys, maybe you did. But I think this situation is not unlike that. And I like what Gil was saying with regard to the discretion of the organizers and the check pilots. And I believe it's Kilo, is that the gentleman that was just speaking? I understand your reservations and you don't want to do it, so just don't.
I don't.
So
The
there
other
you go.
part, they tried to
And,
organize 2 clinics together. There was not only the Red Star Clinic that was going to happen on a weekend, but there was a NATA clinic that was already scheduled on that same weekend. And you're trying to tell them, look, let's try and separate the 2 of these. And that was not received either. So, whenever you can talk to, you're blue in the face. And if they don't want to listen, they're going to get to handle it all on their own.
yeah,
That-
and
that
you
was
don't
The
have to do
point
it.
on this is that we want to try and I think the point that I want to make is that as check pilots, I would love for us to get involved in the clinic organization, make sure that we're in an oversight position. Just like the leads have their responsibility, I think as check pilots, we have a responsibility to the organization to watch and see what's going on. And it is definitely a problem if the clinic organizers don't listen to the check pilots, because a lot of these guys, and in the case that Keela's bringing up, the clinic organizer didn't even have a wing card, and that's a problem. And so how do we deal with that? If we're seeing problems in the organization, then it needs to be brought up the chain and decide what we're going to do about it.
Okay, guys, there are a question was asked, Gil and Jeff. Is the RPA going to issue fast cards to cabin class aircraft and high wing airplane? Yes or no?
Not the high wing.
But cabin class?
Yeah, if you as a check pilot will do the check ride, the RPA doesn't have a problem with it. It's at the discretion of the clinic organizer and the check pilot. Look, our beloved treasurer, Wayne, just hosted at his huge house in North Carolina a Cherokee clinic. I think they had 20 or 30 Cherokees. They did a fantastic job. They're all in 3 ships and they're doing the preparing for Oshkosh. They did a great job. And I think anybody on this Zoom, could very quickly jump into a Mooney or a Cherokee and fly formation. I mean, heaven forbid, people even flew S3s in formation and bombers in formation. I see Hartley laughing. So it can be done, and we don't. I don't have a problem with it as president of the RPA.
So who?
But don't come in your Cessna.
Who on this Zoom call would put together mass formation at Oshkosh with Nanchang, CJs, and Moonies?
But that is a different question, right?
Not really.
So
we're trying to
if I can weigh in for just a second, I think the problem becomes giving them a card. I think that's an issue because we expect them to do pitch outs and rejoins. We expect them to do extended trail, non-aerobatic, sure, but can a Mooney guy keep sight in extended trail?
Can a Cherokee guy do extended trail?
Yes.
But
Well, maybe not to 40 degrees and 20 degrees of bank. Is that but can it be done?
So I think
we train and check so that people can do pitch out and rejoins, both turning left and turning right. And military aircraft of all different kinds have been doing that for years and years. A6s, S3s, F-111s. That's not the issue. Cabin class aircraft is the issue. Hartley, what's FFI's status?
They've got Moonies taken care of, and Bonanzas, and Rutan, and RVs.
And they're working on Cherokees, right?
That I don't know. He's not. They have not replied to my last 4 texts and phone calls.
Okay.
What's the difference in Cherokee? Literally, really a Cherokee and a Comanche or any Beechcraft.
Speed.
Something else to just bring up on this subject. I mean, before we go on, we've got a lot of RV guys showing up at our clinics, which is a great thing. I have no qualms about it, especially, they match with us pretty well, the bubble canopy. Be careful. I discovered at this last clinic that if guys are reading the FFI stuff and show up at our clinic, we're going to be surprised because they're going to do some things that we don't expect. If you haven't had a chance to do that, I would encourage you to maybe look at the FFI stuff. For instance, 2 always rejoins to the left on a straight ahead rejoin. Out of close trail, 2 always goes to the left. That's just two that come off the top of my head that they've come down as a standard. So just if you get an RV guy, it might be good to just make sure you pick his brain a little bit and make sure you know where his head is.
I think there's two issues here that we're kind of trying to meld together. First of all, I think it's good training to include a lot of diverse aircraft as long as they're compatible. And that's part of the thing in organizing a clinic. You've got to make sure not only the airplanes are compatible, but the training these people have had. So yeah, a lot of times if you've got to know an RV guy and you've got him trained up, he works well with us and helps us get bigger formations and fly more foreships and get better training for everybody. But on the other hand, we've also got to sanitize what we expect our card to provide these people. When I lead these guys at Oshkosh, I have no druthers on taking up carded Red Star guys, but I don't want the RV guys that we've gotten a card at our clinic to think that they can fly in our our controlled airspace or our waivered airspace type formations. So, and I think what we have to do is we have to try not to keep blending us all together and making one umbrella that fits every scenario. We need to have all these other airplanes that are compatible with us to get our training in some of our small regions. I get 7, 8 airplanes is all at my little clinic. I need these guys, but you got to make sure they know what they're getting from the deal also. They're not going to come fly at Oshkosh. I've had several guys try, but they just realize that's not going to happen. So you got to look at it as two different scenarios and make sure that you're being true to both.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, the other one the Ranger brought up is, yeah, we do in the military have cabin aircraft that fly formation, but they do it as professionals every day. Whenever you get into what we're talking about with cabin aircraft, it's not that scenario in any way, shape, or form.
I hardly call the A6 a cabin airplane.
Well, the EA6, we'll give them that. That's a card game going on in the air, but
Station
anyway.
wagon, it's not a.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that we've got some. So to summarize that, no institutional policy, discretion of the organizers with oversight from us as the check pilots going in there and making sure that we're doing it, number one, safely, and number two, standard, and managing expectations to make sure that they know where they stand. Does that sound fair enough to everybody? All right, cool. We're kind of getting to the end of where I wanted to go. It's 9:45 back here on the East Coast. What other stuff does anybody got some issues they want to bring up? Postal, go for it.
So at Oshkosh last year, and then in Ocala, I saw non-fast overhead brakes. And I just would like, as FAST president, to reach out to the cadre and say, hey, if you're at a clinic, we do things that are in the book only. If they want to mess around and do something fancy, they should go practice that somewhere and do that outside of a clinic. But fast events should be run to fast standards, and it keeps people from showing off in front of their peers and also doing something stupid. It was a bunch of RPA guys at Oshkosh that came in and did one of those pop-up breaks that the Blue Angels and at least the Thunderbirds don't do anymore. Lima doesn't do anymore. And, it's just, it was poorly executed. Nobody got hurt, but they did it in front of the FAA and everything. And we I don't know how many people saw it outside of the Warbird community, but no one approached me, thank goodness. So I'm just looking for some support from you guys to kind of be the cops in the room and then explain why. And if anybody's got any question, I can stay after the meeting and chat with you.
I agree. I've seen hot dogging at clinics, several clinics, and
so how do we handle that?
It's cool to do that with, if it's briefed and you do that with friends at home, that's one thing, but in a defined training environment, I agree with you. I think it sets a bad example.
I totally agree. So it's up to us, unfortunately, to be the cops, to be the bad guys and say, hey, pull them aside, try and do it delicately, but say, hey, that's not what we do.
I've got one thing to bring up, and Gomez and I confronted this at Bones Fest, not confronted, but we had to sort it out. How many guys know where to find, check class, know where to find the actual 8900 quiz, which is one of the few things that the FAA says the FAA requires that we administer for a fast card. Everything else, we get to do whatever we want. The 8900 quiz is on our check form, but I mean, is everybody, I guess what I'm trying to say is everybody on the same page that that's something, that's the one thing the FAA requires of a person who gets a fast card. And do we know where, do you all know where the quiz is? It took me a while to find it.
I've got a copy with me.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, but I mean,
Because Ranger gave it to you.
So there's no requirement.
No, I
for-
think, I
there's
think
no-
I actually gave it to Ranger.
There's no requirement to have the person send off and take a Scantron and do it. It could be open book. It could be done as a group in a ground school. We just want them to, the candidate to have done it.
no, I'm sorry. I'm gonna come back to this, make sure everyone understands this. This is the one thing, as far as I understand, the FAA requires, doesn't require a written test, doesn't require a record, but it does require that we do that. It's not something that we institutionally think is a good idea. It's one of the only things that I'm aware of on our check ride that is required by the FAA. Is that it? Am I incorrect?
Well, Jeff, can you address that or look into it for us and get back to everybody?
Yeah, I don't think it specifically says quiz, but I think that they expect us to have the knowledge of the air show environment in order to be able to operate in it. I don't know that it specifically says a quiz has to be
It says
administered.
quiz on the check ride form.
It
it
does
says-
say it on the check ride form, but whether it says that in the 8900, no. I don't think that it says it in the 8900, but as far as we are concerned, what we've decided was to demonstrate to the FAA that we've ensured that they know the minimum about the air show environment is by just taking this short quiz.
Okay.
However they do that, whether it's open book, closed book, in mass, one-on-one, cheated with another guy, or whatever. At least we can say that we've seen that they've got the air show ops knowledge that's required.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Hey, Line Dog, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Going back to Postal's comment about the brakes. Here where we fly at a controlled tower airport, we have them trained that they know what pop-up brakes are. And they approve it. And so we come down initial at 500 feet and we do a pop-up brake from initial to downwind. And the tower loves it. They're perfectly happy to let us do that. Am I hearing from Postal that that's a no-no and we shouldn't do that?
Well, I can tell you that from another organization that I'm involved in, the CAF is death on that because they had a couple guys get in trouble with the FAA for doing exactly that. Just because Tower says that you can do it doesn't mean that you can violate the rules. And there is no rule per se that says that you can't come down initial at 500 feet and pitch up to land. But whether an investigator looks up there and sees guys hot dogging it and doing an air show and calls that careless and reckless, is totally subject to interpretation. And in the CAF, a couple guys got violated for it. So that's something that you guys have to decide what your comfort level is on that. I mean, personally, I think that's a great way because it's much easier to see people on downwind if you're below their altitude. I think it's a great thing. Whether that's smart,
Historically, we've done that at the chicken drop with an FAA inspector standing there on the ramp watching us, and he's never said a word.
Depends on the
Okay.
FAA inspector.
he's
I
a
guess
great
we're lucky
guy.
we got a good one.
And
Here's
there's
the-
a lot of
here's-
guys they'll tie their shoes at the appropriate time during an air show. And that's all great and well and good. But I can tell you, if the shit hits the fan, they're going to hang you before they get home. So,
Plus,
I
we have
would say
to
that
be-
at the clinics, we gotta adhere to the standard, and I think what Postal was talking about was some of the RV guys were coming up an initial at 500 feet in close trail and breaking out of close trail, which,
Okay, can I add something on this?
please.
When you have a group of guys you fly with together all the time, you can brief other things. You can brief tactical, you can brief BFM. There's a lot of things you can do with guys you fly with all the time. But when you go to these clinics and you're meeting some guys you've never flown with before, it's hard enough just to get the basic training and get the guys to do the correct. I mean, we debrief for an hour at Oshkosh half the time just on normal breaks. Not doing it perfectly. So I think it's one of those things, we got to keep it separated from what are we officially doing? What is standard? If I go out to All Red Star and my guys up in the north, we do pop-up breaks, but we go there, my guys, might not be comfortable. So it's one of those things, like, we got to keep it separated again, Yeah, I'm off for that type of stuff, but I treat all these clinics and all these different pilots like my kids when I taught my kids how to fly. Do I go out there and hot dog in front of them and give them a bad example? No. Do I go out and hot dog? Yeah, when my kids aren't around and we got some guys we fly with, we go do stuff that's not standard, but we brief it. So I think it's fine, some of this stuff, but we got to remember what we're at clinics for.
I think what Postal was getting at was that whenever you're at a fast clinic, it's fast standards. I heard that exactly. And you can get into fan brakes, you can get into diamond brakes, you can get into all kinds of brakes, and you can get into trouble extremely quick. But if you just do a normal brake, I don't care if it's 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and you have a uniform downwind, that's an art form. And we can't seem to even attain that in most of our clinics where everybody has the standard spacing and downwind. But whenever you're with your buds, do whatever you want. Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that everybody knows that that's my position too, is that, if that we have the standard, we know the standard, we adhere to the standard, and we expect the standard. What you do with your buddies on the weekend, as long as it's briefed and it's safe, I am all for that. But at the clinics, we need to keep it to the standard.
And I don't think the chicken drop is a clinic. Personally, that's the way I see it, Mozam.
Right, that's a
The
fly-in.
chicken drop is not a clinic. We haven't
There
had a
you go.
check ride at the chicken drop in years. It's all
Right.
very experienced guys who have all flown together for 15 years.
Right?
And that's a distinction, I think, I think that's an important distinction for us to understand, especially as check pilots, doing the standard when it's appropriate, so.
Right. So Oshkosh, Ocala, All Red Star, those are formal clinics that I've seen non-standard formations, and all three of them didn't look very safe. So I think we beat that horse pretty good.
Cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Postal. Any other concerns with guys around the room before we sign off? Let me just say one other thing. I really appreciate what you guys do. I look around this, I have known all of you for a heck of a long time. I have a huge amount of respect for you, and I really appreciate what we're doing. I think there's no doubt that we're the best signatory. We're the most standard. We are by far the best one out there. I've seen that over and over again in talking with Smitty, talking with Lumpy at the NATA, that we do it far and above what everybody else does. So I really appreciate it. It's because of us adhering to the standards, trying to mentor these guys that we're able to do this. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
I totally agree, Jeff. I started out in the Yak Pilot Club, and you're leading a great job right now. You're doing a great job, buddy. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Mozam. I appreciate it. Gil, anything before we sign off?
No, great to see you all. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Postal,
Thanks,
what
guys.
was the tail number of that Epsilon that you were going so fast in?
What was that?
315 Zulu Golf.
Okay.
Postal, you're now an Epsilon driver, I hear.
Yeah. I did 245 knots downhill in it. And
Well,
that was a
Question.
tailwind.
The record in an Epsilon is a
I-
325 knot ground speed.
Jesus.
Pappy, you have a
I
question?
just heard that an Epsilon pilot made a gear up landing, not on purpose. I mean, on purpose.
Well, Pappy, we covered that before you got on
No.
board, but that was Mike Felucci, and he had a mechanical problem and had no choice but to put it on its belly.
The good news
Yeah.
is, as I told you guys, his plane is minimal damage. He'll be flying again in another month.
Yeah. Hey, one more plug, if I can. Tomorrow night is the lead meeting. I would love to have you guys, if you got some time, I would love your support to try and hammer home some of these points that we've been making tonight. If you can make it tomorrow, great. If you're not and you're meeting out, I get it, but I would sure love your support if you can be there.
Just send the details.
Is that, yeah, you got the address on that? Is it, I know, I saw the email, is the form number and all that business in there?
Yeah, I sent a copy of the letter that went out to the leads, and it's got the information for the Zoom, but I'll send it out again tomorrow for you so you guys can see it. And that'll allow you to get on board with the Zoom meeting as well.
Sun and Fun is on the first week of April. Hope to see a bunch of you there.
I'll be there.
Awesome.
Yeah.